Hello, and welcome to another movie review. If you are afraid of clowns such as Pennywise, the Dancing Clown, or maybe Doink the Clown, or quite possibly Bozo, this review may not be for you. Because we will be discussing a clown that's a lot more sinister from any of those three, and that is, of course, Art the Clown from Terrifier and Terrifier 2. So, sit back, if you're a fan of clowns or if you like these types of things, let's get to it.
Hello there, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and children.
So if you're not familiar with the Terrifier franchise, it does star Art the Clown, who's the main antagonist in the film. The movie was written and directed by David Leone. It does have, of course, David Howard Thornton, who plays Art the Clown in both the first one and second one, as well as Lauren Lavera, and it does have a cameo at the very end from Chris Jericho himself, Chris Jericho, the wrestler from WWE, as well as AEW. Now, the second one, which we'll be discussing, is completely different than the first one. The first one, it does serve its purpose as far as the introduction to what I knew as Art the Clown. Of course, I believe he does have a little miniature film that came out in 2013 that I'm not familiar with. However, this is the first adaptation that I was introduced with him. Now, the first one does really well in the terms of bringing a new slasher flick to what is known as the slasher franchise. He is not that well known, though I do recommend watching the Terrifier series if you're a fan of horror or even slasher. Now, jumpstart to the second one, which is what I'm doing a review today. The story does falter in one sense, which I'll discuss in the very end. However, the story, I believe, does build upon not only the first one, because Art the Clown is resurrected, but also it plays along the sense of a little bit of a more backstory. Though we don't have all the questions answered, it does solve some answers to it. Now, the story also does a very well job, more so than the first one. It does have an intriguing storyline. You do fall in love with the characters a little bit more than you did with the first one, as well as it's definitely paced out a lot better. The cinematography of the film is very much of an independent style, which, of course, if you know that style, if you're familiar with, and you already know what you're basically watching. Now, when it comes to the characters, actors, and actresses, they do an amazing job to it. Very high pitch, more so than what you would usually get during an independent film. They're very well throughout the whole entire flick. The actual atmosphere, the music to it, does play some sense of an 80s kind of genre of horror music, which is very nice, very understanding. Now, Art the Clown himself is definitely terrifying. He doesn't say anything at all throughout the whole movie, just like he doesn't say anything in the first one. It's all done with facial expressions, which I do give, of course, David props to doing it, because other than Silent Bob from Jay and Silent Bob, it's very hard to give those expressions off. Now, the part that I didn't quite like so much was, of course, the gore. Now, the first one is definitely a slasher flick with a little bit gore to it, where it's a shocking moment. If you're not familiar with this movie, it did have some streaming out in the theaters, where a lot of individuals either A, fainted, or B, threw up in the theater. It was one of the most talked films of the Halloween season because of that. Now, when this movie needs to have gore, it does wonderful into it. What I didn't like about it is there are sequences in there where it seemed to have gore when it really wasn't needed, where, you could have gotten away with a couple of slashes here, a couple of stabs there, and it would have been fine. That is basically borderlining what I'm getting into as far as what's known as torture porn in the flick of Hollywood movies. Now, with that in mind, you may think, okay, that's disgusting. What kind of videos is that? In terms of that, we're talking about Hostel, we're talking about Saw. Those are considered torture porn flicks. This is very much borderlines, if not goes over to that genre. And that's what I kind of didn't like about it, because of the fact that it took away from the horror aspect in the terms of making it scary and just brought gore just to bring it. And really, that's my only disappointing factor of it, because I kind of wish they alluded more to it and not really shown that much to, of course, keep the flick engaging, because there's some of the stuff in there that was just gory to be gore, to see how far you can push the envelope. Now, some of you may be fans of it, and that's fine. I'm not degrading in that nature. It's just not for me. I like the Saw franchise because of the fact that it has a good story element to it. This one has a good story element, though some of that kind of takes it out of the story and kind of makes you think, is it really needed? Regardless, though, I do like the Terrifier series in the sense of bringing a new horror villain into the atmosphere, in the Hollywood atmosphere that we, didn't think we needed. Especially with Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, all those guys, definitely up to par with that. So I would definitely recommend it, especially during the Halloween season. If you're not a fan of that stuff, then that's completely fine too. But regardless, though, if you did see it, it is an independent film, so I want to know what you guys had thought about it. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Go ahead and leave your comments down below. Subscribe to all of the social media platforms, especially this one, as well as click the link that takes you to the merchandise store. And we'll see you next time for our next review.